Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity and creator of Bogash Life and Balance. And today we're going to talk about basically like the future of mRNA vaccines and what we've learned about them, even though we thought we knew it all. But I think first, and I'm going to wrap up 3 different studies that we have recently that all talks about this. But I'm going to start with explaining how they do, because I find that most people when I talk to, they don't really understand how the mRNA vaccines work, including a patient who just had her first shot this past week, which is ridiculous because we should all understand how these work and how they're vastly different from prior vaccinations. In most vaccinations that we have either a killed or an attenuated vaccine. So we'd knock it over the head, we'd stab it with a knife, and then we would actually inject the bacteria, the virus, into the body, allowing the entire virus to be reacted to by our immune system. And the mRNA vaccines are vastly different in that they don't have the entire viral, in this case, viral particle. They have basically, we could call it the head, the spike protein. And it's not even that, it's the instructions for that as an mRNA loop, like our DNA, but it's the mirror version of that. And we inject the mRNA in a capsule of antifreeze, basically, so it doesn't get digested by the immune system right away. The goal is for it to get picked up by cells, and then your cells themselves are what's making the viral or the spike protein, the head, if you will, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And so I hear everybody talking about this has been well researched, and yet there's a lot of things we found out that we didn't know before we knew everything. So a couple of things I'm going to point out, and this one of the ones that just was recently published was a little shocking to me. And the first thing is that and even on the, interestingly enough, on the American Institute for Allergy Research, Fauci's group, on their website, unless they've changed it, the last time I looked, they were talking about the mRNA vaccines as if it was an attenuated or killed vaccine, which is, I thought, a little crazy, and I just was floored by that. They were misrepresenting what the mRNA vaccines are. But we thought we'd just inject it into the arm. There are certainly discussions about how the injection occurs, and whether you aspirate first to make sure it's going into the bloodstream or muscle. There's some big concerns over that I have not looked into very much. But the thought is that we'd inject into the arm and it really kind of stays here, maybe some lymph nodes in the axillary under the arm, but that's it. Well, turns out that we even knew before they were released that we have what's called distal spread. So these mRNA particles make it to your pinky toe, to the ovaries, to the liver. Now, some tissues more than others. But clearly, it doesn't just stay in the arm. It spreads everywhere throughout the body, including the ovaries. And so the thought was that, this can't affect women's menstrual cycles, until we did a study that did affect women's menstrual cycles. Granted, the changes were small, but they were still affecting the menstrual cycles. When we said, oh no, there's no way this can happen, it does. And so if it's affecting it there, what about other areas? The other thing that was surprising was that the spike protein, the little protein piece, the head that your cells are making, were never supposed to leave the cell. There's something called a receptor binding, the RBD, the receptor binding domain, that attaches. So instead of the spike protein being released into the bloodstream, it pops out in the end of a cell, like those of you old enough to remember the radial tire where you get the bubble on the outside. Well, that's what happens, and it's not supposed to be released. It never cleaves. The fusion, it's not fusion cleavage site, but it's close. Fission cleavage site, but it's not supposed to leave the cell. Well, turns out you can find spike protein in the blood. So clearly, it's leaving the cell, which was not anticipated. And what this particular study that I found, this was really a little shocking, was they looked at, now granted, this was looking at immune response, not resistance to infection, totally different discussion, but it's looking at immune response and how our bodies responded to first, second, and third doses. And I think the thing that was the most shocking, first of all, the authors in this study, to quote, said it remains to be determined precisely how the immune system responds to mRNA vaccines. These are researchers in immunology saying that we don't really know, and yet people on Twitter and Facebook are like, oh, we know everything about this. It's been the most researched vaccine in history, and clearly the researchers in this field do not agree with that. But what they found is that the mRNA protein, which is supposed to get broken down quickly, 37 days, even 60 days later, so 2 months later, the mRNA is still present in the germinal center. So in the lymph nodes, you could see regions where the mRNA was still present in the axillary region. It was still producing spike protein 60 days later. I can tell you that this was absolutely not anticipated. And most of the would say that, oh, it's broken down quickly, it's gone in just a couple days, and we knew early on that that wasn't the case. A lot of stuff that's happened that we weren't aware of. The other thing that we're really, like, there's people that talk about, well, there's other vaccines that we need multiple doses of, but what we don't see with other vaccines is diminishing returns with each vaccine. And so there was a study out of Israel looking at people with first and second boosters and fourth booster doses. Now they did not look, this was not powered to look at infection rate, but infection rates were relatively high across this, especially when Omicron hit. But the author's quote out of here is low efficacy against mild or symptomatic Omicron, and then the need, and as well as the infectious potential, because one of the things they found is that there was a pretty high viral load in the people that had breakthrough infections, but the infectious potential of breakthrough infections requires an urgent need for the next generation of vaccine technology. I thought we were on the next generation, but apparently we're looking for the next generation, because this one is not turning out the way that we thought. Still seems to be okay with hospitalizations in severe cases, even though depending upon how you look at the data, that may not be as strong as we like to think it is. We won't really know until years have gone by and we get rid of all this crap and drama associated with actually publishing and looking at the research. But the last study is more of a commentary, and it was talking about how we can shore up vaccine efficacy. And wow, it's talking about how, maybe this isn't turning out as well as we thought, so what can we do to increase vaccine efficacy? Let's address cardiometabolic health. Like, holy heck. Like, I've been saying this from day one, that we need to address lifestyle. It has not at all been a topic of the conversation. Nothing frustrates me more than, hey, we have this vaccine, this is all we need, and now that we're realizing it didn't turn out quite as well as we think it is, we're saying, well, maybe we should institute some lifestyle, especially looking at cardiometabolic factors, not just obesity, but how that obesity is playing a role. That also means thin people with cardiovascular risk. Because we know that immune response in people with cardiovascular or with poor cardiometabolic health, their immune response to the vaccine is not as strong. So we don't give more. We are giving more, but we don't give more. We should shore up and make the lifestyle changes that we should have done from day one to increase vaccine efficacy and put all of this behind us. So a lot of moving parts in this one. As always, I'll post a link to these 3 studies in the description. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.